Hey everybody, so I just watched Sean's video about Palestine. It's truly wonderful and truly worthy of your time. I'll link it in the description. Toward the midpoint of Sean's video, he talks about the Ursula K. Le Guin short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, and it made me remember a bonus video that I made about that story around 2 years ago, about how I often see that story is, I don't know, kind of misinterpreted or interpreted in an incomplete way. I thought I would release that video now, not as some sort of a dumb fucking call out to Sean. His interpretation was great. It served the video great. Rather, I want to share it because I think my interpretation of the story, the way I read Le Guin's writing, is also very relevant to the way we talk about Palestine and Israel. And I thought it was interesting. So I'll share it now. This is the 2-year-old shitty Patreon video. Hope you enjoy. Hey everybody, so tell me if you've heard this sentence or something like it before. There can be no pleasure without pain, no good without evil, no light without darkness. In my daily life, I don't hear people say this all the time, but it's nonetheless ingrained in my mind as a thing people say, and I'd be pretty surprised if you'd heard it for the first time just now. This truism is a thought-terminating cliché if there ever was one, right? It sounds like it comes with some deep metaphysical claim about the nature of good and evil, when in fact it's kinda just making a run-of-the-mill comment about how language works. And let me show you what I mean by that with a little thought experiment. Say nobody in the entire world could see. We were all blind and we always have been. Well, in that case, there would neither be a word for sightedness nor for blindness. After all, language can only describe phenomena that we can be made aware of. And if nobody could see, there would be no word for the absence of that sense. But this fact doesn't actually say anything substantial about sightedness, the physical capacity, right? The people in our hypothetical can't see, they can't process information with their eyes, and that's true whether or not they know about sight. And the same is true for good and evil, pleasure and pain. If nobody, under any circumstances, ever felt pain, if we lived in a state of never-ending homogeneous pleasure, well, we wouldn't have a word for pain or pleasure. If there's only one emotion, unstoppable joy, then what use does the word joy actually have? But, and I feel like you're getting my point, that world of homogeneous pleasure would still be pleasurable. You don't need pain to experience pleasure, you need pain to have a word for pleasure, and that's a huge difference. So, in the end, the platitude doesn't really track, right? I don't think it makes much sense. But, people still say it. The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas is a short story / philosophical thought experiment by Ursula K. Le Guin. It is about a small utopian society, one that Le Guin invites us to imagine according to our preferences. Do you think the perfect society has a lot of drugs? Then the people of Omelas have a lot of drugs. Do you think they'd have orgies? Then feel free to imagine an orgy. It all seems great until the end, where it's revealed that somewhere in this society, a child is getting systematically tortured in the most brutal way possible. And we're led to believe that the treatment of this kid is what allows Omelas to be so good. If the child were brought up into the sunlight out of that vile place, if it were cleaned and fed and comforted, that would be a good thing indeed. But if it were done in that day and hour, all the prosperity and beauty and delight of Omelas would wither and be destroyed. Those are the terms to exchange all the goodness and grace of every life in Omelas for that single small improvement. So, what is this story about? What do we make of it? Well, a few months ago, I went on Twitter to ask people what they thought, and here are some of the responses. It's a challenge to the reader. When is it too much? When do you walk away from paradise? Is it one life more? How much is too much to pay? How societies, however perfect they may be, are often built on someone's suffering? It's supposed to be a critique of utilitarianism. That's a pretty good representative sample of the answers I received, and you can see they're all pretty similar. According to this account, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas is about judging the society of Omelas, and by proxy, judging society itself. No matter how good this world is, they are still abusing a child, and that's wrong. So, I don't think this is a terrible interpretation, that it's stupid or totally unfounded or whatever, but But I do fundamentally think it's the wrong way to go about looking at this story, and that it kind of misses the forest for the trees. So let's talk about it. We'll begin with the passage I already read, the one that lays out the terms of the story. If the tortured child were brought out of his captivity, Omelas would suck. This feels really concrete, doesn't it? The author is telling us, as a matter of objective fact, that to release this child would be to destroy the goodness of Omelas. But I want to make one basic observation here. This is made up. There is no Omelas, no child suffering within it, no real causal relationship between those two things. And in fact, this entire situation is pretty absurd when you think about it. Like, she says that the kid makes Omelas' goodness possible, but why would that be the case? Do we normally find that torturing random people makes societies better? It's fake, it's ridiculous. This might seem like a dull thing to say. Of course it's not real. It's a short story. We know this. But it's important here because in the case of the ones who walk away from Omelas, we know why that fiction is being deployed. The author states her own motivations. At the beginning of the story, Le Guin describes Omelas for us, this beautiful utopian place. But she also tells us some of her thoughts on utopias. It is her belief that good places, beautiful, just worlds, are dull to people, not believable. The trouble is that we have a bad habit, encouraged by pedants and sophisticates, of considering happiness as something rather stupid. Only pain is intellectual, only evil interesting. This is the treason of the artist, a refusal to admit the banality of evil and the terrible boredom of pain. When she concludes her positive description of Omelas, she says, "Do you believe? Do you accept the festival, the city, the joy? No? Then let me describe one more thing." In other words, you don't buy this. You can't buy it, and that's why I'll add in this suffering child to make the story believable. And finally, toward the end, after she has described the child, his suffering in the basement, and his necessity to the greater utopia, she asks, "Do you believe it now? Doesn't it seem more real, more possible?" See, Le Guin here is not just presenting us a trolley problem, asking us if it's ethical to sacrifice an individual for the joy of society. No, see, she's kind of making fun of that entire notion. Why do we need to ask these kinds of questions in the first place? Why is it necessary for there to be some great evil to explain the good? Why is it somehow easier to digest this dark, brooding, child-torturing Omelas than it is to accept the good Omelas we had before? And I suppose this is why I appreciated the interpretations people gave for this story when I asked them, because in some way, they're showing just how brilliant this story is. Le Guin announces so many times what her story is about, the primary thing it is trying to do. My video here isn't some big hot take. Many people have said what I'm saying now. And yet, when we think about the story, remember it, we are often left only with this child. His immoral treatment makes this society plausible, makes the text worthy of our consideration. Pleasure and happiness is not contingent on badness, horror, or evil. As I said before, I think that's an incoherent belief with no real grounding in reality. But it's still so easy to feel that way. Feel that everything good must in some way be contingent on badness. The story ends ambiguously. Le Guin tells us one more thing, that occasionally people leave Omelas. They go on, they leave Omelas, they walk ahead into the darkness and they do not come back. The place they go toward is a place even less imaginable to most of us than the city of happiness. I cannot describe it at all. It is possible that it does not exist. But they seem to know where they are going, the ones who walk away from Omelas. It is of course impossible for me to say where these people are going, but I have my own interpretation. That when they leave, they are going somewhere that is good, one that is not shackled by gratuitous and extreme harm. They saw the kid in the basement and they realized this is actually dumb as hell. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this little video. Bye!
Look at that.